Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2, Episode 11, and it is 5 p.m. Spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So, big episode here, lots going on, lots of turmoil, and maybe a reason why a few of the characters are going to be sticking around past what should be the end of their shift. Particularly Robbie and Dana seem to have reasons now. Maybe others will get reasons as well. Maybe some of them will disappear in an episode or two. But there's a lot going on here. A lot of moving parts with different characters. And I'll be honest, borderline overwhelming at points. There's a scene early on in this episode where they bring in this child. This mother comes rushing in with a kid in the backseat who won't wake up. And they rush in and they're checking him out. And there's like multiple little things that happen while they're just putting them in the bed for the first time. And they're like, there's a little look that Langdon gives at one point. It feels like some people are being suspicious of the mother and why the kid's in this condition. Like he's been left in the car with the windows all closed or something like that. And that's why he's got severe heat stroke. And then there's like a moment where like Joy just grabs Perla's arm, and I think she's just looking at her watch, but it almost felt like Perla like looked ready to smack her. There was a lot going on in the space of about 15 seconds in this episode, and that's just one segment of it. There's a lot to talk about here. I guess the first big thing though to really get into is the Ace storyline. So there was mumblings of an Ace plot at some point in this season. I kind of incorrectly assumed that we already had it because we talked about the siblings and the deportation. No, this is the actual plot. This is very much like, you know, Ace bring this woman in that they've injured, and like she gets medical attention. But the big thing here though is the instant reaction from everyone in the ER and everyone how they're kind of like on razor's edge almost for the remainder of the episode, pretty much, because they're around. We see some of the patients that are waiting in the waiting room leave because news spreads that there's Ace in the building. We find out that some of the nurses upstairs, even ones who have documentation, ones who are legally entitled to be there, are still worried. They're still scared because sometimes that doesn't even matter. So it's like putting this like everyone on edge, and I think the second they walk in and the way Robbie looks over at them, because I think there was a concern that they wouldn't, because there was some buzz that HBO Max it asked them to like try and be balanced about how they presented them, and people were worried that was going to lead to, I don't know, like kid gloves or whatever. I don't think they did a bad job here. It feels like they really got across, if nothing else, they really got across how their presence made everyone else feel in that building, and how it was, impairing like certain people getting treatment because they were scared. And obviously it ends with the arrest of one of the nurses, Jesse, because he tries to give the woman a sling when they've decided that they're just leaving. And because he in any way gets in the middle of it, we don't even see exactly what happens, we just see it in the start of it, and then we see him getting carted out in handcuffs. So it's like one more thing for this day for everyone to pile on. But I think the overall like sense of dread and fear with them around, and the fact that one of them's always got a bandana covering most of his face, makes him very ominous. And it's kind of this thing where it's almost like something you would do in a movie to make someone like a horror movie villain, right? You'd make someone scary by covering their face, but this isn't based on a horror movie or trying to go for something theatrical. This is actually shooting for something that's very real right now. If anything, the critique I've heard of this plotline more than anything is that the most unrealistic part is that they would even bring this woman to get treated in the first place. But of course, we can't have the plot if they don't do that. But the vibe of these people, the way that they make everyone feel, and the overall power trip they seem to be on, all feels based in reality, which makes it more scary than if it was just a horror movie villain wearing a mask. So while this moment with Robbie getting in his face is cathartic in a lot of ways, because he's kind of speaking everyone's mind and it feels like he's being brave enough to actually say it, it also is what directly leads to them wanting to leave and results in the arrest. Not that I'm blaming Robbie, I think it just further proves the point of why everyone feels that they have to walk on eggshells, why everyone is tense and scared, because they can just decide to do something like that at any moment. So it just proves the point. It just further hits at home what the problem is here. So I think that this is fairly well done, as best I could tell. It made them feel scary and intimidating, and obviously, I'm speaking to this as an outsider, as someone who's from a different country. But I feel like, from my perspective, it looked like they did a good job here. But by all means, though, respectfully, give your opinions in the comments, and I do mean respectfully. So we had that plot, and that was kind of the big centerpiece in a lot of ways of the episode. It was hard not to kind of treat that as the main thing. Elsewhere, though, we did have some other big things going on. First and foremost, we have more Santos and Langdon stuff going on, where Dr. Al talks to Langdon and says, hey, there's a problem with you and Santos, and he doesn't really say what it is. He just kind of says, oh, I was an asshole the first time I worked with her, and I'm trying to apologize, but blah 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 blah. He doesn't actually say what it is, right? He doesn't want to go into the details with Dr. Al, but he does indeed try and talk to Santos. And Santos throughout the episode does feel very dejected, does feel like her heart's not in it. She's just waiting for the shift to end at this point. She doesn't have that snark that she normally does. She's just kind of like at the end of her tether. And Langdon tries to talk to her, and says that he was an asshole, says that he wants to apologize, says he was sorry, says what you expect him to say, basically, in the situation. And Santos immediately seems like she's going to just sort of like roll her eyes and walk away, and that's the end of it. But she does kind of decide to turn back and actually get into a bit of a more of a heated argument, where she says that she doesn't think he should be here. Interestingly, she also drops that only a few people actually know that he was stealing meds, and that she will only be satisfied. She thinks it's bullshit. She doesn't really believe that he's had this redemption, and that she'll only be satisfied if he actually tells everyone in the ER that he stole meds, which did make me raise an eyebrow, because, well, I get that maybe only a few people know for sure what he did, right? That being Robbie and I don't know who else necessarily. But it definitely seems like other people will have probably at least figured it out, right? At the very least, everyone knows he was in rehab. They know he was using, right? Maybe they didn't know he was stealing from the hospital, but there's like little moments, for example, where like Whitaker, I assume, wouldn't be one of the ones who would know. Why would he be told this unless Santos told him, which is maybe different. But Whitaker did have that line like way back at the start of the season where they had to order some meds, and Whitaker said, "Oh, I better do that." And it was kind of an awkward moment, and he didn't mean it to sound shitty or like accuse Langdon of anything. But to me, that felt like he knew why Langdon had been away. That felt like he knew that he'd been caught stealing before. That's what that moment felt like to me. Now, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just because, oh, it'll look bad because that's the thing you were on, right? He doesn't know he was stealing them. That's possible. But it certainly feels like, at least if people don't officially know, I have to expect that, at least, Cassie maybe figured it out, and or at the very least would be sympathetic, right? I say this a lot in this show, this phrase, it's not an accident. Because there's so many times where one plot will help back up another plot. And case in point here is we've got the whole sequence in this episode of Cassie talking to Ogilvy about sympathy for drug users and not judging them and being there because they need someone and they need help. And it's not their place to judge. Like, you have to have some empathy. It's not an accident, and that's taking place in the same episode where we're having this Langdon and Santos blowout. And, it's one of those things where it's hard not to feel a certain way about the two sides and where they're coming from here. And typically this season I've been more on Langdon's side. And part of that may just be Santos' personality is just so hard to take, right? She is so abrasive. She is so set in her ways. And she's very binary in the way she looks at people, right? And I think that's maybe what we're getting to the root of part of this here, right? Is that she basically, when she's treating patients, either she thinks that you're a victim and gets very, like, strong and very focused about trying to bring justice for the victim and gets, like, angry on their behalf. Or, she thinks that you are maybe not necessarily, like, an abuser per se, although in some cases she has. But even in this episode, there's the guy with the baseball. Like, she immediately cracks a joke about, oh, did you steal that from a kid? She immediately assumed he did something wrong to someone else, right? She had to like sort of like get that in there. It's almost like she thinks either you're a victim in some way or you're an abuser. And when I say abuser, maybe just bully is a better term here. And like you're either in one of those sides of the coin, and it seems like she has not very little kind of in between, right? Maybe there's like a neutral in between if you don't fall into one of those categories. But it feels like once she's made her mind up on if you're one or the other of those, she doesn't really seem to have much sympathy or believe in any kind of redemption. Like, you know, the way she rolls her eyes and says it's bullshit to Langdon when he tries to apologize. When he doesn't, you know, and he even does say, like, you know, you don't have to like me, you never have to like me, but, you know, I'm doing the apology, right? This is happening. So I think that this was another good scene, and you know, having their story go forward. And she gives him this final kind of like, oh, well, you should tell everyone then what you did. And to be fair, he is left standing there as if, oh, that would be tough. Like, you know, he's been going around doing the apologies, but maybe admitting exactly what he did to everyone is maybe a little bit much for him to take. So, and maybe she's technically right in that. I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't know what the ins and outs here of like you know, should everyone be aware of what he did, and you know exactly what he did, right? Because if they only just think that he was using and therefore that's why he was in rehab and that's why he's back now because he sort of completed that, I don't know. But it would be interesting if ultimately by the end of this season, Robbie's the one who actually sticks up for him. You know, given like what they've been like all season, if he's the one that steps in and says no, because if Robbie didn't, if Robbie chose not to spread that, if Robbie chose not to like inform more people of that specific part of the incident, then it would be very interesting to see him back up why he made that choice. And maybe seeing Langdon with patience throughout the day is going to make him feel better about that choice that he made. Even if, you know, at the start of the day and even halfway through the day when he's talking to Langdon, he doesn't feel that very sure about that. He says, I don't know if you belong here anymore. He said that. He said something similar even to Samira, you know, in the past. And sadly, it's kind of like taken effect on her because when he kind of, you know, chews her out this episode, and we'll get to that, like she kind of says, oh, maybe I don't belong here, and walks away. It's almost like his negative chastising has had an effect on how she's viewing herself, and maybe that's something that Robbie has to reckon with himself for his own improvements, because everyone here is flawed. Like no one is coming out here you know, hunky-dory. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the younger characters aren't that. I mean, like I'm trying to think of Whittaker's flaw other than just being a little too shy, I guess, but a little too awkward maybe. So maybe some of them are a bit more squeaky clean than others, but just this idea of like the idea of having empathy for someone and like giving them a chance to do better. And it feels like Santos's major flaw, not just with Langdon, but just in general with a lot of patience, is when she's made up her mind, that's it, and she doesn't really believe in any like improvement. And I'm not saying that there's not some things that are unforgivable and should never be forgiven. Obviously there is. What they've hinted at in her past sounds unforgivable, right? Well, you know, there's definitely things that you don't get a second chance on, but it sounds like for her, she's kind of like this kind of like very, very hard line in the sand. Once you've crossed that line, she's not accepting any coming back over it. And it's like a big difference between her and some of the others, like Cassie, who is very sympathetic and try to help people who haven't even decided to help themselves yet. So it's, you know, there's definitely a scale here, and it's like, it's good that she cares so much about getting justice for people who have been wronged, and she has that sense of right and wrong, but maybe there is a problem where it's like too, you know, laser locked in, and that's all it is, and there's no shades of grey or, you know, graduality to it. It's just, no, you're a villain now, and I'm never going to see you as anything other than a villain. When, you know, lots of people who have done very valuable things and good things in the world maybe did something bad in the past. That, you know, it's nice to think that anyway. So regardless, yeah, another big sequence for those two characters in this episode. So to go through some other characters here. So I mentioned the Cassie plot, which I guess will dovetail into Ogilvy and his shenanigans this episode. He had a rough episode, Ogilvy. Oh, we'll talk about him. But Cassie actually takes him outside to the park to treat a homeless woman who has an addiction problem and has like a big, I don't even call it a rash, but like she has a big thing in her leg, and they're treating that. And it's a very interesting sequence because Ogilvy keeps questioning, like, oh wait, why are we doing this? Like, he has like no sympathy, and this, tracks with his character thus far. He just is like, wait, why are we helping someone who's not actually coming into the hospital? Wait, why do you volunteer for this thing to help people? And when Cassie actually eventually says, hey, maybe you should volunteer for this reach out program, he's like, maybe. Like, he clearly, he doesn't get it. And the awkwardness of him, sitting there as this woman's getting treatment, and the woman can tell that he's judging her, and it looks awkward by it. Like, she looks uncomfortable by the way he's feeling uncomfortable, and it's not quite the same as like how Cassie would typically make her feel, presumably. And it may have a negative effect even. She might feel even less inclined to come looking for help, because Cassie even says, like, she's been waiting for weeks or months for this woman to come and get help. So, right, so you've got that side of Ogilvy where he's not much of, he doesn't have that much of sympathy in him. However, he wishes this was the biggest deal he had to face in this episode, because when they get back, there's two big things that happen. Just on Cassie's side, the woman who was effectively choosing to die at the end of the last episode, she's passed away while she was gone. So Robbie's actually chewing her out. And this is actually when the ice plot comes in. Like, it kind of interrupts this chew out segment where she is very sorry that she missed the death and that she wasn't here to sign off on it. But that's one side of that. The other side of this, though, is Ogilvy has been checking on the patient that he gave a book to, the guy that had kidney stones, and he's just waiting for some medication and maybe a result back or something. But he's like, Ogilvy's like, oh, you're good to go. You just have to wait around for a little bit. Here's a book, right? That was him last episode. He checks on him during this episode and just sort of says hi, gives him a thumbs up, and it feels like this is the one, if all the patients he's talked to, this is the one that it feels like he's actually bonded with a little bit, because he gave the book and the guy's thankful for it. So there's been a little bit of bonding. Unfortunately for Ogilvy, this guy takes a turn for the worst and gets very serious, where they have to rush him into the room, and they have to start checking all of his organs and whatnot. And as they're talking about it and they're saying, oh, you did an ultrasound and this and that, Ogilvy missed something, right? Because they say, oh, did you check this? And he's like, yeah, that was normal. He's like, and what about this? And he just goes, I didn't check that. And both Robbie and Samira's heads just snap up and look at him like, you didn't check that? Which then falls back a little bit on Samira, because Samira, being the one who was kind of like, in charge of him, should have like double checked that. And she like kind of did in a roundabout way, where she said, what about the rest of his ultrasound? But she didn't specifically ask about the thing that he missed. So it's on her as well, right? And she actually apologizes to Robbie afterwards, and that's where Robbie chews her out and, tells her to leave her mum issues and everything else outside the building. You have to be focused here. And Samira is very apologetic and like takes the blame for it, but walks away saying, maybe I don't belong here. And it feels like Robbie's left standing there, and I don't think he feels good about her walking away saying that. I think he feels something for that. I think he cares that she's now got this defeated attitude of like, I don't want to be here anymore. And I wonder if we get a payoff to that. Like, does something change in these last few hours of the season where he gives her a more genuine pep talk, or tries to help, or whatever it may be. I mean, I was talking a lot last time about he maybe ignores his personal life a bit too much. Even though, don't get me wrong, she made a mistake here. She, as the supervising, she should have caught this, and she didn't. But regardless, Ogilvy has to stand and watch when they're trying to save this guy's life, and he just looks completely shell-shocked the entire time. Like, when Robbie asks him a question, he just stands there in shock. And poor Javadi's mum comes down to like help with this, and when she finds out someone missed this on the ultrasound, she immediately says, "Was this you?" and looks straight at Javadi. And like, I'm like, holy shit, like, Javadi, if you want to slap her, I think I'd be supporting you in this. I feel like that was, you want to talk about being unprofessional in the workplace, her chastising her daughter and assuming she made a mistake. is like so unprofessional and so disrespectful that I like if I was Javadi, like we would be in bad terms for a good while after that little moment. Like I would be livid with that little thing. But regardless, it's like, you know, Ogilvy does fess up. He says, no, it was me. He doesn't wait for someone else to tell her. He jumps in and says it. So he's taken ownership, and he does apologize to Robbie afterwards. He clearly feels terrible. And this kind of feels like it might be him getting his wake-up call. And one of the nice touches about it as well is that in the first half of the episode, he kept saying, I want to do an incubation. If I get a third incubation in before the end of the day, I'll have done 3 in my first week, and that must be a record. And he's so enthusiastic about it. He's treating it like he's running, you know, doing stats, like sports game stats. He wants to break records. He wants to do this number of things. And during this procedure, they say, oh, he needs to be incubated. And they sort of like basically let Ogilvy have the chance to opt into it, and he's just in too much shell shock. So the fact that he was bragging and wanting to do this, he was actively begging to be able to do this procedure for half the episode. And then when he's given the opportunity, he's too out of it. He can't, like, it really sells the idea of just how much this has gotten to him. Like, his entire thought process has been collapsed because he missed something and a patient might die, like very seriously might die. Like, he's very, very close. So he does seem genuinely apologetic. He does seem like he really cares after the fact, and this is a bit of a wake-up call for maybe the attitude that he has had. So there's hope for him yet, even though he has been such a little shit throughout this entire season. There is hope. There is hope because he gave a crap here. But I liked this entire thing because there was consequences, and I liked that it was something that Samira missed because she was brushing things off because what she was going through the last couple of episodes. So there's consequences on her as well, and there's consequences on Robbie for the way he's still kind of handling this situation with them, because he kind of lets Ogilvy off a little bit lately and says, oh, you know, it's easy to miss, and he kind of like sympathizes a bit more with him. But Samira, maybe being the more experienced and obviously being more qualified, should have caught it, and she didn't. And it's clear why she didn't catch it, you know, based on today. Like, they've already went through like some beats here in previous episodes that kind of like set them up for this. So yeah, no, I mean, I think this was good character development for Samira, for Ogilvy, and even for Robbie here, and how he handles it. And, you know, likewise, Robbie has, well, he has several good moments. Obviously, the moment with the Ace Agent was great, and a couple other things. Like, honestly, Noah Wile's acting, whenever he's like just getting ideas across with just his face, it's really good stuff. He's very good at it. And selling the discomfort in certain moments. Like the awkward moment when the ice guy asked where the bathroom is and he has to kind of show him. You can feel the discomfort the entire time as he's doing it. It's very, very good. But he goes back to see his biker buddy, and he gets his X-ray, and he's showing it to him, and he's like, "Hey, you know, this part's a bit too wide here," and that could be a number of things. It could be this is inflamed, that's enlarged, or it could be a tumor, right? We can't play Arnold saying it's not a tumor because it might be a tumor, right? But there's no way of knowing until they do a CT scan. And he's like, "Oh, how long is that going to take?" And he's like, "Oh, it'll be a few hours," and his friend says, I mean, are you going to be here still? And Robbie just sort of hangs his head, and you can tell that he's making a decision in the moment of like, yeah, of course I'm going to be here. Like I'm making sure this gets done properly because this actually might be, because I think that's the other thing the friend says is like, is this, you know, serious? Is this like important for me to get this checked? And he's like, yep. So I do like this idea that what's keeping Robbie around for at least a few more hours past his shift potentially. Is this idea that he's staying to make sure his friend's okay, right? This is like a personal reason why he wants to stay, and to make, because his friend might not go through with it if Robbie's not there, and he's sort of doing this as a friend, sort of first and Doctor second, if that makes sense. And I think I really like that as a choice, especially since like even the start of this episode, he said something like, "Oh, I can put up with Dr. Al for 2 more hours." And now here he is, because all season I'm out of here at finishing time, and I'm riding off out of the sunset. I'm done. I'm going on sabbatical, and then here he has a reason to choose to stay, not because he's forced to, not because something bad happens to him, but because someone that he actually cares about seemingly has a problem, and he wants to make sure that it goes through and see it to the end. So I like that. I like that as a setup for the character. And Dana, actually, in the flip end, just chooses to stay back and cover at least the start of the night shift because the charge nurse for the night shift is the woman who's been with the hospice patient, and she's obviously had a very rough day. And Dana says, "Hey, take the night off. I'll cover until I can find someone to fill your shift for you." So that explains why Dana might be around a few hours extra till the end of the season, and we kind of have a reason now for Robbie as well. How many of them choose to end up staying? That's I mean, we'll see, but that's interesting in and of itself. All right, so that's skid back around, right? Back up the truck to the kid that came in and the mother, because everyone's kind of noticing there's something off about her, right? And that they're kind of theorizing, like, do you think the mother did this on purpose? She's not kind of crying. And Robbie's like, look, that's not for us to decide. We treat the kid, and then, there's agencies that will investigate that. But he does point out, though, that you can't just assume because they're not doing what you expect that they're guilty of something. Like, people cope with trauma in different ways. Not everyone's going to break down in tears. Some people will, recede and get quiet. Some people get loud and angry. Some people do whatever, right? People respond to things like this in different ways. You can't make an assumption based on how they're responding, necessarily. But Dr. Al's sort of paying attention, and she seems to be a little concerned with it as well. And she notices the mother's kind of attitude and kind of just her detachment. And there's a couple of quiet moments when the mother's holding the boy's hand and kind of backs away. And then ultimately she disappears. And Dr. Al's like, wait, she disappeared? She walked outside? And she ends up finding her outside and almost seemingly tries to kill herself by jumping in front of a truck. Like, she walks onto the road in front of this big truck, and Dr. Al just is luckily there to pull her back and brings her inside. And it's like, oh, we have to put her in the, one of the holding rooms and be like, well, I think she might be held here now under, like, self-harm protection. Like, she has to be held here for, 48 hours or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact time frame, but it's like, oh shit, well, what if the kid's better again? And to be fair, the kid's been like, they've had to put him in like a big ice bag at one point to try and get his temperature down, and like, they're having to help him breathe, and like they're doing a lot of stuff. The kid was in a pretty bad shape. But it does kind of raise this question of like, oh shit, what do we do now? And notably, like Langdon and Robbie are kind of standing side by side, like doing different parts of this conversation, and it feels like there's no weirdness for a moment between them. Just because they're focused on the case, they're focused on caring about what's happening with the mother and the kid. They don't know if there's any other like family members to call to maybe come and deal with the kid while the mother's been looked after. So it's like, okay, right. So there's a bit of I wouldn't say it's much of a mystery, but there's definitely some unknown elements as to exactly what happened, and the mother's clearly guilty about something. Whether she intentionally tried to do something or accidentally almost killed the kid, and that's why she's acting this way, or maybe she's felt like a bad mother for a while, and this was kind of she was trying to get out of it in one way, but then that didn't work, so she tried to take herself out of the picture. I don't know, but it felt nothing about it's happy. It's all very, very distressing and sad. So there's that. And then I guess the closest thing we have to a comedy like subplot in this episode is probably, and it's not even, and I say closest because it's not that funny all the time. There's just some funny elements to it, and that is Mel, Dr. King, and her sister Becca. Because there is some inherent funniness to like King being shocked that her sister's got a boyfriend and kind of like trying to cope with that, even though there is some serious elements here that the show is kind of discussing with this conversation, where she wants to know who the boyfriend is, and we find out they met 6 months ago. He also goes to the same place that the sister does, and Mel asks, basically starts asking questions to find out if everything's consensual, if she was pressured into something. The sister Becca is kind of annoyed that she's been asked these questions and says, I don't have to tell you. I can tell Langdon because he's my doctor. She's kind of getting frustrated with Mel being a bit too not caring, a bit too controlling, I guess. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this is one of these plot lines where I think you can really sympathize with both characters. You get that Becca wants to feel a sense of freedom, doesn't want to feel like she's been over protected and kind of over nurtured by Mel. But at the same time, you get Mel wanting to make sure her sister is okay and not been taken advantage of, and that, you know, the shock here for her is that her sister's kind of building like a normal life that Mel doesn't have time for yet, and is kind of surprised. Like, at first it's like, oh, is someone taking advantage of my sister? But then the realization, especially when she's still feeling down about it later in the episode and Dana sits down to talk with her about it, she kind of ultimately admits that she's scared that this means her sister's going to like, leave her and go and be with this guy, get married, and she'll be alone. And Mel, Dr. King drops an F-bomb, and she never swears. Like, she finally, you know, says something like that out loud, and it does feel like, you know, Dana says that it feels good to say that out loud, and she kind of doesn't really say anything, and I don't think it necessarily did feel good, but there's at least like a moment of growth there, of like maybe realizing what she's actually upset about. Which again, you can sympathize with her wanting to make sure that her sister's not been taken advantage of in some way. But at the same time, it's like, no, the sister does make it clear, no, I was the one who brought up sex. I want sex. Sex is great. Sex is wonderful. I love sex. And Mel, it's funny, actually, that's why one of the reasons why it's funny when Mel's talking to Dana is that she's like, she's having sex. Great sex. And she's just quoting her sister, but it was a really funny line. It was just a really funny line to hear. So... And yeah, you probably get the sense that Mel's not had much time for that kind of thing, between looking after her sister and following her career, right? A very intense career at that. And maybe this also sense that she's like sacrificed a lot of her time to help her sister. Something, and then Langdon even says when Langdon talks to her about it that, you know, her sister does have choices to make of her own. And King's like, this is different though. How is it different? It's different because she feels uncomfortable about it. That's why it's different. But I think, you know, it's very sympathetic. I think obviously Mel is in the wrong for wanting to dictate or overly control her sister, but I don't think it ever goes into like territory where you can't sympathize with her. You understand why she's having this reaction. You understand why it takes her some time of thinking to like get to the conclusions she's going to have to get to accept that her sister can make these choices. But she's sympathetic the entire way, and her raising her voice once does not make her look like a villain, right? Yeah, she gets a little agitated and yells at her sister a little bit. She apologizes for it after, but it's very understandable and human, right? You know, and she's already having a rough day, right? But it's kind of funny that this is completely taking their mind off the deposition. Like, when Dana asks about the deposition, she's just kind of like, oh yeah, that was shit, but it happened. But my sister's having great sex. I don't know how to deal with this. So, no, that was all very, you know, like I say, there was some comedy in there, and part of that was just because of the performance, right? Was her name Taylor Dearden? Yes. She's Bryan Cranston's daughter, right? Why is it not Cranston? Anyway, doesn't matter. Point is that she does a really good job, because she is this innocent, like, very upbeat character normally. Seeing her be kind of frazzled like this is a lot more fun than the deposition frazzle, because before she was just kind of like a deer in the headlights. This is a lot more like self-growth frazzle, so you can kind of enjoy her going through the process, because she's a good person. She'll ultimately make the right choices here, and that's kind of sweet. Although, I did laugh. We got a reference to her being made to watch Elf yet again, where she says, and I quote, "I've seen Elf 146 times because that's what she likes to watch. And now she's off with a boyfriend, and what have I got to show for watching Elf 148 goddamn times?" I may have the number slightly wrong, but it was in that ballpark. That made me laugh. It made me laugh when she first complained about her sister making her watch Elf. That's really funny. It's kind of a thankless task, looking after her sister, apparently. But hey, I'm sure she can watch her own movies now. She can pick her own movies. Like, hey, if she's at the boyfriend's for July 4th, they're going to watch fireworks with his family. And it is kind of sweet watching Mel try and like find out like the boyfriend's parents' number. Because it's almost like a parent saying, hey, I want to have the parents' contact details in case something happens. I need to know where my sister is. But, you know, she's an adult, right? Obviously, yes, with some health issues, but an adult all the same. So, yeah. So that was kind of the fun plot. And then, oh, yeah, I almost forgot about this, but the cliffhanger that I do have to mention before we go here is poor Emma gets caught in a headlock. So there's this patient who's been asleep since he came in, And like there was one friend who showed up and just kind of like, oh, it's going to be a few hours, I'll just come back then. And that was kind of it. But when he finally wakes up, Emma's like standing there, and the guy freaks out and says, "What did you give me? Where am I?" And like grabs her in a headlock. So it's a good cliffhanger. It plays up on the earlier moment where someone grabbed her arm and Dana got very protective. I suspect Dana might come in and drop kick this asshole based on that previous interaction. I think what's effective about it though is that unlike last time, which was quite early in the season, I think by this point Emma's like got a lot of bread with the audience by now because of all the stuff that happened in the Louis episode, her dealing with the assault victim. Like I think throughout the episode, Emma's kind of become very sweet and endearing. She's kind of, you know, she's not exactly like Whittaker necessarily, but she's kind of got that innocence, that kind of like young innocence that Whittaker has in a lot of ways, but from the nurse perspective. And I think, obviously, we care about her being in peril here. I don't think anything too bad's going to happen. I feel like people are going to rush in the room, and it's going to shake her up a little bit. I don't think it's going to be too tragic or anything, but I hope I'm right. I hope it's, you know, kind of a scary little moment, but nothing more. But that's where we leave off on. So very curious to see how that wraps up at the start of next episode. But yeah, so yeah, that was the big stuff. I mean, there was so much going on this episode. They're densely packing these episodes, and I think in particular case with this one, it felt like just about every single main character got a moment of growth or a moment of character progression or drama. You know, Robbie obviously usually gets a ton. He had a ton here, but like everyone, you know, Langdon and Santos definitely got one. Dana, I mean, at least she was a supportive character for Mel. Mel obviously had some here. But even Javadi got a couple of little moments that really felt like a big deal, and so on and so on. Like everyone felt like they had like a little moment, right? And it seems that Whittaker's working up the courage to tell Santos that he's moving out, which, you know, maybe that'll actually upset her now. Maybe she'll miss having him there. Maybe because Garcia's not coming over tonight, she'll be like, "Hey, Whittaker, do you want to, you know, get pizza and watch some dumb movie?" And he's like, sorry, I'm moving out. I'm going to go move into Robbie's. And that may upset her actually at this point. She may not think that's going to upset her, but I think it may actually make her feel a little bit abandoned in a way. So we'll see where we go with all that stuff. But that has been my thoughts on the Pitt. Thank you for joining me. A big episode. We got 4 episodes left of the season. Expect more big stuff, but good stuff. So thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. You can of course support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube memberships. Thanks for everyone who already does. It really does help keep everything coming. Check out the movie podcast over at MailFuzz Movies. And otherwise though, that is me. So thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?